My name is Lin. For 3 years, I worked as an assistant at Global Horizons, an overseas employment agency. Our office, located in a bustling city district, was always filled with hopeful faces. Young people, desperate for a better life, families pooling their life savings, all dreaming of escaping poverty and building a future abroad. We plastered our walls with glossy posters of gleaming factories, happy workers in pristine uniforms, and towering skyscrapers in distant lands. We promised a pathway to prosperity, a chance to provide for loved ones. I believed in that promise, at least at first. I genuinely thought I was helping people achieve their dreams. But behind the facade of professionalism and bright promises, Global Horizons was a meticulously crafted trap. It was a place where hope was sold at an exorbitant price, where dreams were systematically shattered, and where the most vulnerable were stripped bare, not just of their money, but of their dignity and their future. Looking back, I wasn't just processing paperwork. I was an unwitting cog in a sophisticated machine designed for exploitation. My initial role was simple: greet clients, explain basic procedures, help them fill out initial forms. The first red flag was the fees. They were astronomical. For a factory job in a developed country, Global Horizons would charge sums equivalent to several years of a laborer's salary back home. Mike, the agency's owner, a smooth-talking, impeccably dressed man who always seemed to have a new luxury watch, would explain it away as processing fees, training costs, and visa expediting. "It's an investment, Lin," he'd tell me with a charming smile. "A small price for a lifetime of opportunity." But as I handled the paperwork, I saw that little of that money actually went to legitimate costs. Most of it vanished into Mike's pockets, or into a network of partners he vaguely referred to. Families would sell their land, take out crippling loans, and beg relatives for every last penny, just to pay us. The desperation in their eyes was heartbreaking. Then came the training center. We had a separate facility, supposedly for vocational training and language classes. But the reality was a derelict building with rundown classrooms. The trainers were often unqualified, the materials outdated, and the lessons mostly involved rote memorization of basic phrases and meaningless drills. The real purpose of the training center wasn't to prepare workers. It was to justify the exorbitant training fees and to keep clients busy while their applications, or lack thereof, slowly progressed. The most chilling deception involved the job offers themselves. Sometimes, they were entirely fabricated. Clients would sign contracts for specific factory jobs, or roles as nurses or construction workers, complete with detailed salary figures and working conditions. But weeks, or even months, after paying us and enduring the training, the supposed job offer would mysteriously fall through. "Oh, a glitch in the system," Mike would shrug, feigning disappointment. "Or the company overseas changed their needs. It happens. We'll find you another placement, but there might be a small additional fee for reprocessing." These poor, desperate people, having already invested everything, felt trapped. They couldn't go back, having sold their possessions and borrowed so much. So, they would agree to the additional fees for a new opportunity, which might also fall through. It was a never-ending cycle of false hope and financial bleeding. I saw families reduced to begging, their faces etched with despair, their life savings gone. But the absolute worst part was the whispers, the chilling rumors that circulated among the older staff, never openly discussed with clients. Sometimes, after a client had paid an astronomical sum for a guaranteed job in a distant, less regulated country, they would simply vanish. No updates, no calls back, no trace. Mike would simply tell the worried families, "They're probably just busy with their new work. It's a tough environment. They'll call when they settle." But the knowing glances between Mike and his top lieutenants told a different story. These weren't just lost contact. These were individuals who had likely been funneled into forced labor schemes or even human trafficking rings, sold off to unscrupulous employers who bought their contracts from agencies like ours. The thought that I was helping to send innocent people into modern-day slavery, under the guise of finding them a better life, made my blood run cold. The shiny facade of Global Horizons, promising dreams, was truly a trap built on broken lives. The whispers of vanished clients grew louder, turning my stomach with a cold dread. Mike, the agency owner, had an uncanny ability to brush off these disappearances with practiced ease. always blaming the harsh realities of working abroad. But I knew better. The truth was far more sinister. One day, a young man named Hugh, barely 20, came in with his elderly parents. They had sold their ancestral land, a small rice paddy, to pay the exorbitant fees for a high-paying factory job in a country known for its strict labor laws. They clung to every word Mike said, their eyes full of desperate hope. Hugh signed the contract, his hands trembling slightly, clutching the pen like a lifeline. A month later, Hugh was deployed. A week after that, his parents came back to the office, frantic. They hadn't heard from him. Mike assured them it was normal, a communication issue in a new country. But I knew the signs. Hugh had been sent to a remote, less-known factory, one that wasn't on our usual list of partners. The address on his job offer seemed slightly off, almost generic. I couldn't shake the feeling he was one of the vanished. The image of his parents, their faces etched with worry, begging for updates, haunted me. The agency's deceptive practices weren't limited to just job offers. They extended to the very documents that were supposed to protect the workers. I discovered that some visa processing fees were actually for forged documents. Fake educational certificates, manipulated work experience letters, even doctored medical records to pass the health checks. Mike justified it by saying it's what the clients want. They don't have the qualifications, but they need the job. We're just helping them achieve their dreams. But this wasn't help. It was setting them up for failure and potential legal trouble in a foreign land, where they would be utterly helpless. If caught, they could face deportation, imprisonment, or even worse. I also noticed that some clients, particularly those from remote villages with limited education, were coerced into signing documents they didn't understand. The contracts were in a foreign language, filled with legalese. We were told to translate them loosely, glossing over the harsh clauses about deductions for housing, food, and training, which often amounted to leaving the worker with almost no take-home pay, effectively trapping them in a cycle of debt. They would work tirelessly, sending scraps of money home, thinking they were slowly paying off their debt to the agency, while in reality, they were barely earning enough to survive, let alone save. Their dream job had become a form of indentured servitude. The most insidious part was the emotional manipulation. Mike and his team were masters at playing on people's hopes and fears. They would paint rosy pictures of life abroad, promising unimaginable wealth and opportunities. But when things inevitably went wrong, they would blame the clients. You didn't work hard enough. You didn't follow instructions. It's your fault you couldn't adapt. This constant gaslighting kept the victims quiet and compliant, too ashamed or too broken to fight back. My own sleep became restless. I saw the desperate faces, the crumpled passports, the stacks of borrowed money. I began to fear every new client, knowing their hopes could be shattered, their lives potentially destroyed. The office, once a symbol of opportunity, now felt like a predatory beast feeding on the vulnerable. Every phone call from a worried family, every blank stare from a client who had lost everything, was a chilling reminder of my unwilling complicity. I was part of this machine, processing the paperwork that sent dreams to their demise. The weight of those shattered lives became an unbearable burden. I knew I couldn't stay. The weight of my complicity became unbearable. Every hopeful face that walked into global horizons felt like a nail in my own coffin of conscience. The desperate parents, the young, naive dreamers, I saw them not as clients, but as lambs led to slaughter. The images of Hugh's worried parents, the forged documents, the unreadable contracts that trapped people in debt slavery. They replayed in my mind like a terrifying loop. The smiling face of Mike, our boss, now looked like the grin of a predator. The breaking point arrived with Mrs. Nguyen. She was a frail, elderly woman who came to the office almost daily, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen from crying. Her only son had gone through Global Horizons 6 months ago for a job in a faraway country. They hadn't heard from him since. No calls, no messages, just silence. She brought us small gifts, homemade food, begging for any news, any sign that her son was alive. Mike would just brush her off with vague promises and cold assurances. One afternoon, as Mrs. Nguyen sat patiently in the waiting room, her worn hands clasped together, I saw Mike hand a thick envelope of cash to a dark-suited man in the back alley. Their hushed conversation was punctuated by Mike's chilling words. "He's handled. No more problems." The man nodded, took the money, and vanished. My blood ran cold. Handled. That word echoed in my mind, confirming my darkest fears about the vanished clients. Mrs. Nguyen's son wasn't just missing. He was likely gone forever, sacrificed for Mike's profit. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of Mrs. Nguyen's tear-streaked face mingled with Hugh's parents' desperate pleas. The scale of the human suffering, fueled by the lies of global horizons, overwhelmed me. I thought of my own family, my own dreams. Was I really going to be complicit in this modern-day slavery? The answer screamed inside me, no. The next morning, I walked into Mike's office, my heart pounding, but my resolve firm. "Mike," I said, my voice steady, "I'm leaving. I can't be part of this anymore." He looked up from his computer, his eyes narrowing into cold slits. "Leaving? And go where? Lynn? You know too much. You think you can just walk away from everything you've seen here? Everything you've done?" He stood up, leaning across his desk, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "I have connections everywhere. If you even think about talking, about exposing anything, I'll make sure you regret it. Your family will regret it. This city is small, Lynn, and I have a long reach." His threats were terrifying. But the image of Mrs. Nguyen's hopeful, then heartbroken, face gave me strength. "I don't care," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "I'm out." I left the office that day, not bothering to collect my final paycheck. The glossy posters on the walls, depicting smiling workers and gleaming skylines, now seemed like grotesque jokes. The hopeful faces in the waiting room felt like ghosts of futures already stolen. The scent of ambition that once filled the office was now the stench of deceit. I walked out into the busy city, shedding not just my uniform, but the heavy cloak of complicity. It's been 2 years since I left Global Horizons. I now work for a nonprofit organization that helps victims of human trafficking and labor exploitation. It's tough, heartbreaking work, but it's honest. Yet, the memories from Global Horizons still linger. Every time I hear a story of a missing worker, every time I see a new agency promising miracle jobs abroad, a cold dread washes over me. The faces of those exploited, the shattered dreams, the families left with nothing but sorrow, they are the true cost of the promise trap, a dark price paid by the most vulnerable, echoing silently in the hearts of those left behind. My experience in the overseas employment industry revealed a terrifying truth. The desire for a better life can be brutally exploited. Agencies promising easy pathways abroad often hide a sinister agenda, turning dreams into nightmares of debt, servitude, or worse. So, how can you protect yourself and your loved ones? Always be skeptical of too good to be true job offers, especially those requiring exorbitant upfront fees. Thoroughly research any agency, check their legitimate licenses, and look for independent reviews, not just testimonials on their own website. Never sign documents you don't fully understand, especially if they're in a foreign language. Insist on a verified translation. Be wary of promises that seem vague or change frequently. Keep copies of all documents, including receipts. Most importantly, if something feels wrong. If the pressure is too high, or if you're asked to provide false information, trust your instincts and walk away. Your future, your safety, and your freedom are far more valuable than any promised job. Thank you for listening to this raw confession from the dark underbelly. If Lynn's story made you look at promises of overseas work differently, remember to like this video, share this crucial warning with everyone you know, and subscribe to our channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another stark revelation. We'll continue to expose the hidden dangers in every profession. Stay vigilant, stay safe, and remember, not every promise leads to paradise.